guys, everyone can hear me? That works really well. All right. Hi everyone. Today we have a great session for you guys. We have marketing in a cutthroat industry. We're gonna jump right in. So a little bit about myself. Who is this guy and why should I listen to him? I started my first web hosting company actually almost 20 years ago, T35 Hosting. I ran that for a very long time and still own pieces of it. We grew to 1 million customers back in the late 90s, early 2000s. These days I'm involved with SmartSites, which is a digital media agency where we specialize in SEO, pay-per-click, social media marketing. And personally, I've been featured in Business Week, Forbes, a couple other publications, and our company was just named to Inc. 5000 fastest growing private company. So we have a lot of expertise in the online marketing space, and especially as it applies to the hosting industry. Cool. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk about general digital advertising, kind of the top level view to get a little bit familiar with general industry trends and the general media highlights before we jump into the specifics. Then we're going to talk about the pillars of online marketing, pay-per-click, SEO, and social media. Talk about analyzing, tracking, the 5 things that you really need to do today, the takeaways, and we'll have actually some time at that for Q&A, so if you have your questions as we go along, feel free to jot them down or try to remember them, and we'll have a good amount of time at that for Q&A. Perfect, let's jump right in, digital advertising. So let's talk about overview of advertising as a whole before we even jump into digital. So this is a great slide for people who have seen my previous sessions. I love leading with this slide because it's a very general overview of the media space where it stands today. It takes a little bit to kind of understand what you're looking at, but what we're trying to see here is on the left is U.S. media consumption. So where are people actually spending their time consuming media? On the right, you have where advertisers are spending their money. So in a perfect world, that should really parallel, where the advertiser should really be chasing the audience where the audience is and spending proportionally. What's interesting is the huge disconnect where, and this is from last year, I'm sure the disconnect's even bigger this year, where 47% of media consumption happens online. So that's where consumers are actually going and spending their time. On the flip side, the biggest ad spend bucket is still TV. So companies are spending money in TV, even though the audience has been moving away from that category. A little story to kind of bring this all together. If we go back and trip down memory lane, go all the way back to a medium that's not big or popular today, but might set a good example of where we're heading with digital. So let's take a quick second and think about radio. For those familiar with the history of radio, it came out from World War I and then got popular after World War I into World War II. The technology itself was never meant as a tool for advertising or a medium for advertising. Radio, at its core, when it came out and for the first couple of decades, really, was a way for one person to broadcast information to a large audience. So you had stations set up where one person would sit and talk, and you had audiences set up. People in their houses had these big machines, big radio boxes, and it was a pastime. People would have dinner as a family. They would sit down and sit next to the radio box, and they would literally listen to what this one person was broadcasting. So actually it took a while before someone realized that I could advertise to this audience. This is an attentive audience. People are literally sitting there listening to this box, not moving, sitting by it, listening to it. Why shouldn't we advertise on it? And the beginning couple of years, even decades, you had the same disconnect where a lot of people were consuming media on radio, but advertising didn't quite catch up and created opportunity. And the first companies that advertised on radio actually did very well because their cost was still low and the audience was attentive and the audience was there. So the reason I like that example is that brings us back into 2017, where you have a very similar disconnect. A lot of people feel like digital's been out for a long time and the opportunity is not there anymore, but the data shows that it really is because the ad spend still hasn't caught up. You still have a huge audience, and the audience for digital is growing and growing. and you don't have the advertising dollars catching up with it yet. So that's why we're here today. That's why we're talking about digital, because it is still a huge opportunity, and we're going to talk about it in a little more detail in the coming slides. This is similar data to what we just looked at, presented in a different way. So on the first slide, where we looked at the data at a certain point in time, this is the data over 6 years. So all the way on the left, you have 2012. On the right, you have forecasted 2018. So what we're looking at is actually in 2012, people were still consuming more TV media than digital. Again, people think that the year to really catch digital and get good value is gone, but it's not the case. Even if we go back, 2012 was only 4 or 5 years ago. If we go back to 2012, that time people were still consuming TV much more. Digital was just starting to grow in terms of consumption. If you think about it, that's when the first smartphones started rolling out. And ever since then, it's been increasing, where if you look at 2018, we're forecast that the study forecasted that people spend 6 hours a day consuming digital media, as opposed to TV, which is going to drop down to 3. Not only that, other studies that have been done recently show that even when people are watching TV, they're consuming digital media at the same time. So even though TV is still 3 hours during that time, people are still on their digital devices. Let's do a quick exercise to kind of reinforce this point. Right now, being around 11 a.m., please raise your hand if you've been on a digital device, computer, or cell phone for at least 2 hours today. Raise your hand. And guys, look around as we're doing this, because this is a good exercise, because a lot of you guys are each other's clients, peers, you're in the same industry. So by show of hands, we had about 75%. Raise your hand if you have spent 2 hours on TV, consuming TV media, or watching TV today. We don't have a single hand up. So that's the idea. Nothing against TV. TV is still an effective medium, but the idea is that it's declining while the advertising dollars hasn't caught up. The big companies still buy a lot of TV media and still spend a lot of money there, and haven't really transferred that over to digital, and that's why we still have this great opportunity. All right. This is also a great slide, and believe it or not, on the marketing side, I deal with a lot of industries, not only hosting and IT, and it doesn't always look as good. It doesn't mean it's a bad industry. Unfortunately, again, not everyone can be in a growing industry, but I would say very rarely does it look as good. So it's good news. It's good news for you guys. You're in a growing industry. Not only is it a growing industry, but from the last full year, 2016 to 2019, which is only 2 years from today, you guys see 50% growth. It's huge. In terms of where it's coming from, you guys would know it probably better than anyone, being in the trenches and being involved in this, but the growth is coming from managed hosting and cloud. So you still have shared hosting growing a little bit, you have dedicated hosting growing, although it's a very small piece of the pie, but the biggest growth is coming from managed hosting, from cloud, managed services in general. A lot of companies who in the past have done their own IT and their own hosting, the small, medium-sized businesses, no longer can take that kind of cost in and specialize in both security and cloud, and everything's moving into managed hosting. They want to outsource it to other companies. So it's great to see when not only are you in a growing industry, but the projected growths have been phenomenal. And every year since 2010, there's been, this just starts in 2010, but literally every year there's been growth. Cool, so we're going to jump into the pillars of online marketing. So in very broad terms, they can be grouped together into pay-per-click, SEO, and social media marketing. And of course, you want to measure and optimize everything as we'll go through right now in the slides. All right, so first one, pay-per-click. For this session, actually different from the sessions I've done in the past, I've tried to break everything down into a formula. I think online advertising in general lends itself very well to formulas because it's very analytical of our media platform. For pay-per-click, the formula is pretty simple. You want your customer value to be higher than your cost per click times your conversion rate. So if you think about that for a little second, what that means is that you have to make sure to think about lifetime value, not transactional value, because a lot of people get caught up in transactional values. you really have to think long term. You have to think like companies like GoDaddy, which don't, on most of their products, don't make any money the first couple of years, and they think very, very far down the line. So you want to take your lifetime value. You want to be able to calculate that and say, this is my lifetime value of a customer. Then on the pay-per-click platforms, if you could actually if you spend less than that for that customer, that's actually a huge win. You get an ROI. So it seems simple. It gets a little trickier, of course. Pay-per-click is very competitive. There's a lot to optimize, a lot to do. But in the very general sense, if you could spend less for that customer acquisition than the customer lifetime value is, it's very easy to scale and grow and get a lot of business from it, and it's something you could start and stop instantly. So it's a very, very powerful platform. Before we jump into the next category, we'll do a quick exercise. So along with the formula, it's important to note that there's lots of pay-per-click platforms. People usually, especially these days, get caught up that there's Google and I should only be doing Google AdWords, and that's all there is. And although AdWords has a very huge market share, there's actually a lot of different platforms out there, including Bing, Facebook. Not only that, in a lot of cases, these platforms are incremental. So people who go on AOL.com and do all their searching on AOL.com typically will not go on Google. So if you want to reach that customer and you're only advertising on Google, you won't. It's not all platforms like that, but Bing specifically, we found that it's all incremental searches. For whatever reason, people who use Bing specifically use Bing and won't use Google, whether it's a default in their search engine or it's a legacy thing. But all these platforms have the potential to reach an audience that you wouldn't be reaching if you're just doing one platform. So to make sure everyone's still awake and still with me, we're going to do another quick exercise. So we're going to go through not all the platforms, but some of the bigger advertising platforms. For this exercise, please raise your hand if you're familiar with this platform. So we'll start off with Google. If you're familiar with it or have done some ads on it at some point or are doing ads, please raise your hand. Perfect. So keep your hands raised as I go through the next one. So for this exercise, we'll see how many have done all the platforms. So keep your hands raised for Google if you've done Google AdWords, and then we're going to have to go in Facebook and Bing. So keep your hands raised if you've done these three platforms or are familiar with them or are doing them now or have done a little bit at some point. Perfect. So we actually have about a quarter of the people still with their hands raised. So let's go in a couple more. How many people have done Twitter ads, LinkedIn ads, and AdRoll on top of these? Still some hands in the audience. And then we're going to go in the last two, AOL advertising, Yahoo Gemini. So how many people are familiar with all of these or have done all of these? I think all the hands went down, maybe one or two hands around the room. So what's interesting to note is, like I said, it's incremental traffic you could be getting. It's also reaching an audience that you wouldn't otherwise reach. And some of these platforms are small, and of course, depending on your manpower and how much you could do, it's not possible to do all of them. But it's good to know that they're out there, which platforms are out there, and where your audience is. Maybe, for example, your audience only searches on Bing. And right now you're not doing Bing, so you're not reaching them. Similarly with Facebook, a lot of people skip Facebook, but maybe your audience is on Facebook. And of course, there's smaller platforms or things, some platforms that I find a lot of people don't know about. Yahoo Gemini, for example. When Bing made a deal with Yahoo to take over their search and take over their advertising and make it Microsoft ads and then Bing ads, there was a small clause in there that Yahoo put in saying that their mobile properties are excluded from this. So, and Yahoo, even though it's being taken apart now, it's actually, they have a lot of mobile properties that are still being used. So if, for example, your target audience goes on Yahoo Finance, and you are doing AdWords and you're doing Facebook and doing Bing ads, you wouldn't reach those people because to advertise on Yahoo's mobile platforms, you actually have to use Yahoo Gemini, which actually is still around. It's a very interesting platform. They actually cap the maximum you could bid per click on it, as opposed to Google, which caps the minimum. But it's just useful to know the platforms and make sure you're not missing any where your audience is. All right, next one is SEO. So SEO is kind of the mysterious thing out there. Talking to a lot of people at this conference, as soon as I said that I'm going to be talking about marketing, that was usually the first question. Oh, you're going to talk about how to be #1 on Google. Very, very popular question, and a lot of people ask me what's the formula, and we work a lot with Google. We're actually a Google partner agency, so we have a lot of insight into it, but people always think that the formula is very mysterious and there's really no way to trace it, data, I really don't want to be doing SEO. Of course, as many know, Google's formula is actually very advanced, but it could be summarized very easily into what I have up here, which is unique content times relevant links minus technical errors. So what does that mean? So that means how high you are on Google in a very broad sense. Depends on how much unique content you have that Google thinks is relevant to that keyword, and how much relevant and authoritative sites link to you. It's as simple as that. So, and of course, you want to make sure your site doesn't have technical errors or anything that Google could penalize you for. But that's what it comes down to, and it's actually a fairly easy exercise. And there's a lot of free tools out there that you could evaluate this. So you could say, I want to be number one for the word web hosting. Or these days everything's more long tail as people have now search in sentences and now you have verbal searches. But let's say I want to be number one for the word web hosting. Pull that up, you see companies up there, and you say, wow, these guys are number one. How do I get there? You could literally evaluate how much unique content they have. You could evaluate how much authoritative links they have. And you could literally have that in an Excel sheet and say, these guys have this many, these guys have this many, this is how many I have. And I come up with a plan to get both the unique content and the relevant links to get up there. Of course, it's always a kind of a moving target because as you do that, your competitors do that as well. But literally, you could come up with a strategy and over time, do what you're up there. Of course, there's always algorithmic changes, and I know a lot of agencies, SEO agencies out there like to scare their customers with, have you been hit by pigeon, by panda, we'll fix your panda problems. But at the end of the day, all these algorithmic changes are meant to penalize people who are trying to kind of go around the rules and do things that Google doesn't think is good. They're literally people who are trying to cheat the system. So as long as you're actually following the rules and following Google best practices, all these changes should affect you positively because literally Google's goal is to clean up search. They want to take all the people out who are cheating, who are trying to spam. So as long as you're following best practices, you really shouldn't be worried about any kind of these changes. Of course, you should be keeping up with them, but it's not necessarily. I feel a lot of people get very scared when Google releases another Panda update, or I don't know if it's the guys who are sending the email marketing with the, have you been hit by Panda, or whatever it is, but I find a lot of people get very concerned when these changes come around. I'll do one quick exercise to kind of drive the point home with SEO. I did a quick search at home for the word politics. Obviously right now is a hot time for politics. Everyone now all of a sudden into politics, even people who weren't. And of course, everyone would want to be number one for it, because sites like Fox News and CNN would pay tens of millions to be number one. The reason Washington Post is number one in this case for the keyword politics is, if you did the analysis, they actually have the most unique content with keywords about politics, and they actually have the most sites linking to it. Then you have sites like, for example, like Wikipedia, that's always up here for these kind of words. Because again, they might not have as much unique content, they won't have tons of pages, although it depends on the category, but they have a lot of sites to link to. Wikipedia is one of the most linked sites in the world, so they always rank because of that. So there's no secret formula, there's no how much did CNN pay Google to be number 5. It's all pretty standard. You actually could look up all the data and come up with a plan. CNN could literally say, this is what we need to do to be higher. So it's not as mysterious as it sometimes seems. Next one up is social media marketing. So that's probably one of the newer digital platforms out there. It's probably not understood as well as pay-per-click and SEO that's been around for 10 plus years. But it's also becoming a very powerful platform. The formula for social media marketing is actually pretty simple. It's your followers times your engagement. So what does that mean? That means you need to have a lot of followers and they need to be engaged with your content. And of course, there's all these different platforms out there. My suggestion tends to be to kind of pick 1 or 2 or 3 where your audience is and concentrate on those. Companies that try to be everywhere at the same time wind up doing a really bad job because they're rehashing the same content on different platforms, and all the platforms are different. Twitter is more suited for very short content, for example. On Instagram, you can't post articles at all. Everything has to be a picture. So you try to post the same content everywhere, it comes out very sloppy and it comes out bad. So depending on, of course, how manpower you have, it's good to focus on a couple, establish and say, my audience is here, and then concentrate on those platforms. Of course, the typical question I get is companies come to me and say, I have a website, I've been around for 100 years, I have a big business, but I'm not on social media. I made the accounts, but I have no one following me. I don't even want to put it on my website because no one follows me and it looks really bad. And it's actually not that difficult to get around that. So in those cases, which are very often, of course you want to optimize your profile. So when you create your profiles, really don't half-ass it. You don't like leave the picture out or leave something out. You really want to have fully complete profiles. You want to integrate into your website. You really need to have your website linking to your social media and the social media linking back to your website. And number 2 and 3 is the tip I usually give companies who are starting out and don't have any followers and they're kind of confused, or maybe they were very big on Instagram and now they want to get into Twitter. Very, very kind of basic strategy, but the idea is you want to follow users who follow your competitors. So there's a lot of tools out there, free tools, where you can put your competitor's Twitter handle and it'll tell you who follows them and who actually are the most engaged people who follow them. And then you could follow those people. You could follow them, you could interact with them, you could message them. The idea is that they start following you back, and these are potential customers, not just random people you're following. And at the same time, you could follow people who post about certain hashtags. You could look up who posted about web hosting today or cloud hosting. You could follow those people, you could interact with them, they start following you back. Of course, as your audience grows, people start sharing your content. Your audience starts selling your product for you. So as you get a bigger following, you post a really interesting article, 30 of your audiences repost it to their audience, and they are literally selling your product for you. So this is kind of a way to get started, but ultimately it snowballs very quickly as you build your audience. All right, perfect. We're going to talk about measuring. So in the past couple of slides, we talked about pay-per-click, SEO, social. It's always important that you want to be measuring all of this. A lot of people jump into this and start running these campaigns and don't have the measurement in place, and then they spend $10,000, $100,000, and they're like, is this successful? Well, I'm not really sure. I didn't really track or measure it correctly. So this is really, really important, and this will be the last exercise we're going to be doing today. So by a show of hands, how many people track their site analytics? So whether it's Google or whatever you use, track the traffic coming to your website. Cool. Go put your hands down. Next one. How many people track phone calls? Track and report phone calls. So in many states, actually, you don't even have to play the message if the phone call is recorded, and you can still report it. Most states, California is not one of them, but most states are single consent. So as long as the one party, which is being you, knows it's being recorded, you don't even have to play a message. You could use the phone call data to actually track back sales. You could use it for training. We have a lot of clients that record phone calls, and then when new employees come on, they could say, this was a great phone call. Why do we close this sales lead? Let's listen to it, let's understand it. And you could track everything back. You could say, this phone call that came in, it turned into a sale. I know that he clicked on my Twitter article 2 times, then he looked me up on Google, and then he clicked my link on Bing. And then based on all the allocation, you can actually allocate your marketing budget. And last one, show of hands, how many people are measuring audiences, or remarketing, or any kind of audience tracking? Not too many. So we had less and less. So first, we started off with a lot of people doing the first one, a little bit less on the second, and a little bit less on the third. I'll tell you a little story. If we go back 10, 15 years, Google Analytics is actually not a Google product. Google did not create it. If we go back 10, 15 years, it was a company called Urchin. It was competing with 2 other companies at the time. And that was the only way you could really get site data. You could, of course, have site logs where you got basic, I had 8 hits on this page. To have any kind of real useful data, you only have these 3 companies around. The data was terrible. This was before integration with AdWords. This was before channel grouping. So it would show you where people came from, and it was on you to figure out whether that was a paid click, a free click, and you had to pay a lot of money for it. Urchin was actually $10,000 a month. $10,000 a year. And that was your only choices. And Google wound up buying Urchin in 2005. They kept it as a standalone service for a couple of years while they worked out all the kinks. It was only in 2012 that Urchin got discontinued and Google Analytics became the official replacement. And Google made it free. Not only did they make it free, they made it better. The reason I tell this story is because there's really no excuse in 2017 not to be doing this. Everything you see up there is either free or almost free. Google Analytics gives you an immense amount of data, all for absolutely free. Like I said, 10, 15 years ago, even less, even 8 years ago, to get much worse data, you have to pay a lot of money. So all of these are free, easy to implement, and you really need to be doing it now, regardless of whether you're actually going to be using the data. Because, for example, if you say 3 months from now, oh, I really want to target the people who came to the specific page because this page shows that they were interested in my product. If you don't have the audience segmentation set up, you can't target those people. You haven't built a tool. So definitely you need to be doing, 2017, you really need to be doing all of these. Maybe a couple of years ago, you could get away with not measuring calls or not doing audience stuff, but I think as competition increases in the online space, there's really no excuse not to be doing this. All right, so we're going to bring it all together. So today we talked about pay-per-click. So pay-per-click is your immediate exposure. Pay-per-click is the different platforms where you literally put your ad up, you put your bid up, and today you start receiving leads. Not only today, you start receiving leads within 10 minutes. The tricky part about pay-per-click, of course, is that you pay for every click. It's very easy to start spending money and start getting no results. It's very easy to waste a lot of money. If you don't set a budget, for example, and start bidding on their web hosting, you could easily spend 20 grand today in one day. So even though it's instant and it's immediate exposure, you have to be really careful with it and make sure that you keep your lifetime customer value in mind as you set everything up. SEO is all about long-term visibility, so it's not as instant. It definitely takes a long time to build enough quality content. And not only that, your quality content has to be good enough that other sites start linking to it. So it's a very slow-moving process, but you get long-term visibility. If you stop doing SEO, for example, it doesn't stop right away like pay-per-click would. And of course, you have social media, which is the ongoing communication, and you really develop a following where people could actually sell your product for you. And we always want to be measuring, analyzing, and optimizing. All right, last slide for today. In the past couple of sessions I've done, I haven't really had this slide, and the feedback I got from the session is people didn't really have a takeaway. So they were like, I like the story about radio, I got to raise my hand a couple of times, but I didn't really take anything home with me. So this is kind of the stuff you take home with you. Whether you manage marketing for your company or after this you would approach the marketing manager or whoever handles marketing, you kind of have some things to take away with you of how I could improve my online marketing efforts. Number one, you want to be using a minimum of a couple ad platforms. So the reason the number is blank up there is, of course, it'll be different for every company. If you have a 20-person marketing department, you could be on every single platform, everywhere your audience is, you could be chasing them. Of course, it's not always realistic. Smaller companies don't have the ability to do that, but you want to decide that I'm going to be on a minimum of 3 platforms because I know it's where my audience is. I did my research. My audience is actually very heavily on Bing. For whatever reason, my audience is very heavy on Facebook. That's where I want to be. So you really need to write down a certain number and then kind of go with it and implement it. Number 2 is for the SEO slide. You really want to publish a certain amount of content every month. Again, it's up to you guys for what's right for your company to decide. But if there's no plan in place, it's very hard to grow your SEO presence. You really want to plan out and say every month we want to, as a company, publish 50 new pieces of content. And of course, this content then gets put on your website, so Google likes it. The people visiting your website are more engaged with your website because you have more information on there. You have your social media audience that starts sharing this. So this is only positive. You're not gonna hurt yourself by publishing too much content. It's all a matter of how much resources you could allocate to it. Number 3, you want to be active on a certain amount of social media platforms. Again, it's for you guys to decide which ones you want to be on. It's very hard to be on all of them and do the exact same thing on all of them and really do a good job at it. So you really should focus and say, where's my audience? My audience is B2B, so they're probably not on Facebook as much, so maybe I should target them on LinkedIn. Or you could say my audience, for whatever reason, my audience is very big on Instagram. They love pictures, they love visual things. So you concentrate on Instagram and you make everything, instead of publishing text, you start publishing images. So you really should focus. You should go back to your company tomorrow, whenever you guys get back, and say we really should be